Greetings, folks, and welcome to the 111th episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. I'm your host, Mark Hasara, retired Lieutenant Colonel, KC-135 pilot, Royal Order of Gas Passers, weapons officer, and joint specialty officer. For 60 years, my passion has been aviation, and there's a lot going on in the aviation world right now. On the Lessons from the Cockpit show, we debrief and talk to some of the most fascinating and intriguing pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. We want to hear their stories, but more importantly, what did they learn from being in these extreme and extraordinary military, commercial, and even private aviation environments? Our purpose on the show, illustrate how does the aviation world work, but more importantly, increase critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. And today, I'm going to do one of those diplomatic, informational, military, and economic current events type of shows, folks, because so much is going on. We got to talk about it. This episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show is being brought to you by Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar. These are beautifully detailed 4, 6, and 8-foot prints of your favorite airplanes on vinyl that you can peel off and stick to your walls or basketball goals or your cars or whatever. They are waterproof and dishwasher proof, like the one you see here behind me, 8874, my airplane when I was stationed at Kadena. There's 158 ready to print right now. Or let us do a custom one for you. If you have a favorite airplane from a particular unit, particular tail number, even weapons load, particularly for modern jets, we can do it for you. We have 790 profiles to pick from. So the chances are we have the airplane that you want or a helicopter. Now, I'm a little slow on the helicopters once again, because the rotor hubs and the main rotor hub and the tail rotor hubs are kicking my butt, but we're getting it done because we have a gentleman now that's on our team that is helping us do it. So go to woolpilot.com and order a couple of these because that's what keeps the show going. The other thing that keeps our show going is my Patreon account at the All Ranks Club, which is in the show notes below. Or if you just want to contribute to the show, folks, I have a Venmo and a Zelle link below, and just put some money in the tank because we appreciate all of you coming by and taking a listen and downloading this. Okay, folks, as I mentioned, there is a lot going on in the military aviation arena right now, but it's also having a secondary effect, folks, on the commercial through the Middle East. And I even have a great video that I'm going to show you of that. Obviously, Israel has been striking Iran and striking hard and with precision, like with a scalpel, because of some of the things that we've taught them, they've taught us, and the weapons that we use, which I want to talk about. But I also want to kind of give you a catechism in what I think is going on, the 15 modalities of war, and particularly the 25 superpower do's and don'ts that was written by Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters in a paper that he wrote, 37 pages, called When Devils Walk the Earth. Folks, all of you need to read this. All of you need to go and read this paper because it will put you in touch with what exactly is going on right now. And it's as if Trump has read this paper. And I really think it's important. And I'll have the link below where you can go and read this. It's only 37 pages, but it talks about the different types of terrorists and those 25 superpower do's and don'ts that need to guide us as we go through this conflict in the Middle East. So grab an adult beverage of your choice, sit down, strap in, and let's begin the Lessons from the Cockpit show with the 17th of June, 2025 dime, on the nation's dime. Or in other words, let's look at current events and what's going on around the world. Okay, before we start, I want to do a little housekeeping, as we used to say in the Air Force, admin creep. First thing I want all of you to understand, I am not for going to war in Iran. We've spent too much capital, blood, resources over in the Middle East. I am not, repeat, not for going to war in Iran. The only caveat that I'll give you for that is if they begin attacking U.S. troops and forces, U.S. troops and forces. That is the only reason I feel that we should get involved in any type of kinetic, I repeat, kinetic, dropping bombs, shooting missiles, bullets coming out of the other end of rifles, those kinds of things, is when the life or limb of American citizens and American airmen, sailors, soldiers, Coast Guardsmen are at risk. All of you understand that any type of war with Iran is going to be extremely messy. We've already proven that with our war against Al Qaeda and ISIS. We went too long, 20 years. And I remember, I'm going to talk about this book a lot, Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And he talks specifically about how long wars dull the sword and drain the exchequer. In other words, the treasury. We don't have the money for a long, protracted war in Iran. I don't think personally, we have the stomach for a war with Iran. This is a Middle Eastern problem. There are armies, navies, air forces over there of our allied partners that can deal with this. Now, they may require some logistical support or intelligence support. And I'm going to talk about that here in a few minutes. But I want all of you to understand, I am not, repeat, I am not advocating for the U.S. to go to war in Iran. They've been our sworn enemy for a long time, but the Israelis have been extremely accurate in destroying their leadership. And I saw a note today where the previous president, who was always screaming about death to America, he's now dead. How the Israelis are decapitating the Iranian leadership at such a level with such speed is just amazing to me. And it means special forces have been in theater in Iran, seeking all these people out, establishing those patterns of life. But it hasn't been our forces, to my knowledge. Let me repeat that again. To my knowledge, American forces have not so far been involved in the Israeli-Iran war, to my knowledge. I will keep reading, okay? Two, we are following, right now, the Trump administration is following a very well-established doctrinal pattern based on years of experience, lessons learned, both lessons learned and observed, meaning we didn't catch on, and our military doctrine. When I was at the weapons school, when we were going to begin an air campaign, all of the things that you're seeing right now is exactly what we were teaching. And remember, I've taught at the weapons school, helped stand up the KC-135 Division, and I was a curriculum director at the Joint Forces Staff College in the Joint Combined Warfighter School. I taught campaign planning at all levels, strategic, operational, and tactical levels, and all the things that you do when you are preparing to either punch your enemy in the face or seek them out and their destruction. For 3 years, I taught at the Joint Forces Staff College. Out of all the military doctrine pubs and a lot of really incredible thinking by some people that have written about how to do this. And we're going to talk about that here in a few minutes, okay? Folks, can you believe this? 2,500 years ago, Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War, and it's still applicable today. It is still applicable to everything that's going on in the Gulf region right now. And basically, the Trump administration is following that playbook, okay? But I taught all this, folks. 4 years at the weapons school, 3 years at the Joint Forces Staff College. I'm a designated W prefixed, meaning I have a W in front of my job number, meaning I'm a weapons officer, and I'm also what's called a designated JSO, Joint Specialty Officer. So my experience and expertise comes with a very intense education that I received while I was on active duty, which still does me well. Fourth, remember above all, I am a joint warfighter. Yes, I flew KC-135s in the Air Force, but literally my airplane touched everything. And of course, we're going to talk about the recent deployment of, I think it's like up to 38 now, tankers that are currently sitting in Europe, which from the bases in Europe, they will be able to explode out to many different places, plus the island of Diego Garcia, which we know has B-2s, F-15Es, and now, as of today, B-52s. So, as a designated joint specialty officer, I understand how all of the services work together and how you plan and execute those things. And also studied how do you go scare the crap out of these people? How do you have these people so scared that the Americans are coming? And folks, that's what those 38 tankers deploying was. That's what the B-52 going to Diego is. It's to make you think, you know what? This may not be a good idea after all. And we'll talk about that too as we get going. But all of my experience, education, training, all goes hand in hand, folks, with what's happening right now. And I will be so bold to say, I am an expert in this stuff. Not only have I taught it, but at the strategic and particularly extensively at the operational level, the planning and execution level. I've done a lot of these things that are happening right now. So I just kind of want to lay out to all of you, I have expertise and knowledge of this. And, you know, as I've always told you, don't take my word for it. Go read the doctrine pubs on flexible deterrent options, which we're going to talk about. Go read, how we jump into an air campaign, because there's actually like a mini air campaign that happens before the big air campaign. And again, please understand, I hope we never get to a major air campaign like we did over Afghanistan, or particularly a shock and awe campaign like we did over Baghdad. If I was to give you an intelligence brief right now from all of the things that I've read, listened to, and have watched, not on the mainstream media, but alternative media from not only the United States, from around the world, the Iranian regime is on its heels. A major portion of the Iranian regime leadership are now, as my good friend Rush Limbaugh would say, assumed room temperature. Since we can't talk about the D word or the K word here on the channel, but you know what I mean. There was a concerted effort to go out and find these people, and they were not going to do capture. They wanted to get rid of these people, and not just military or political leadership, but their leadership of their sciences for nuclear weapons and all of the technology that goes into not only making the material that you require for that kind of weapon, but also the vehicles that you need for transporting it, such as these ballistic missiles that are flying all around. Folks, remember back in the 1980s, Iran and Iraq were at war against each other, and they had toward the end of the war what they called the Battle of the Cities. Iran has some extensive knowledge and experience of how to do these ballistic missile launches and this ballistic missile campaign. And it all goes back to the V1, V2 rockets from World War II and Hitler using those weapons as terror weapons because now they're targeting civilians. And as soon as the Germans started targeting the civilian population, it galvanized them. Galvanized them during the Battle of Britain, galvanized them during the V1, V2 Doodlebug campaign, galvanized them, the British people. And I think you're going to see the same thing with the Israelis, okay? It's going to galvanize them. And they always seem to have this ability to come together even at the worst times and put lipstick on a pig, okay? Make a purse out of a sow's ear, whatever metaphor you want to use. So, what I want to talk to you right now about is I want to lay out for you kind of what the roadmap is for deterring Iran and keeping them from going after us. I want you to kind of have this macro level, high level view of this is how we do things so that when you see it happening, it's not surprising to you. You can see all of these building blocks working together as we move forward, hopefully never, ever reaching a point where American forces are involved in a kinetic Iran United States coalition type of war. I do not want that. I do not advocate that. We're not in a position right now to do that because I feel if we get involved in that kind of kinetic campaign, China sees an open door to go after Taiwan. North Korea sees an open door to go after South Korea. And we certainly don't have the forces, the capital, the will, or the resources to fight three major air campaigns in two regions, the Pacific and the Middle East, CENTCOM and PACOM. That thought just scares me, folks. And I'm a military guy through and through. So I want you to understand this is kind of the flight path that you should see the United States using as we move forward and begin to use our strength and our deterrence to keep the Iranians from doing something stupid. And I think I think at this point right now, the Iranians are truly at a point of what we would call strategic paralysis. They've been hit so hard and their leadership has assumed room temperature that they don't know where to turn to. It's very much like right out of the Bible when Nebuchadnezzar goes and besieges Israel. They took anyone that had any type of leadership, economic, financial capability and basically brought them to Babylon. And every once in a while, I'm going to talk a little bit about scripture here because I truly think that a lot of this, no, I don't think, I believe a lot of this is read about in our Old and New Testament. And for those of you that are LDS like me, Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants too. There's one verse in the Book of Mormon that I have been quoting a lot recently, folks. And the prophecies of the prophets began to be fulfilled more fully. Go read Revelations. Go read Daniel. I read Daniel, all chapters of Daniel, about 3 times last week, kind of contemplating this, okay? But this is strategic paralysis on a whole new level because not only was their chief of staff eliminated, as they said, the guy that replaced him was eliminated yesterday. I can't imagine how the Israeli intelligence apparatus is so um, plugged in to the movements of these leaders, but somehow they are. So, and you know what, folks? The Trump administration gave them a warning back a while ago and said, you got 60 days. On the 61st day, things deteriorated real fast. And within 2 or 3 days of that, Israel was striking, particularly when the international report came out about they're breaking all the rules for the nuclear weapons. The IAEA report that said, no, they ain't doing it. And apparently that was enough of a trigger for Netanyahu. And you have to remember, it's not just Netanyahu, it's the Knesset too. He has to go to the Knesset and say, I think we should do this. There was a lot of people in his Knesset, in his legislature that said, not only no, but heck no. But apparently there was enough votes where they said, yeah, we understand the threat. Now, let me caveat that. There is a lot of video going around right now of people saying Saddam is working on a nuclear program. Saddam is working on weapons of mass destruction. And of course, a lot of us know how that turned out. You have to understand, Clausewitz said in his book On War, you know, uh, most military reports you can't believe, most intel that comes from human sources is unreliable. And believe me, folks, we're working in an era where there is massive, massive amounts of misinformation, which again is right out of Sun Tzu's playbook. All of you have heard all warfare is based on deception. You know where that comes from? Sun Tzu, Chinese general, 2,500 years ago, very first chapter. And again, all of you should go read his very first chapter. If you don't read anything out of Sun Tzu, read chapter 1 and chapter 13 on intelligence gathering. Just go read those 2 chapters because we're living them right now. We really are. And as I've mentioned to you, a few moments ago, if there's two books that you want to read that will really give you a look into President Donald J. Trump's head, it's his book, The Art of the Deal and The Art of War. Notice that the names of both books begin with one word beginning with the letter A, art. When we build a campaign, we talk about the art of planning, the operational arts. And there truly is an art to this. And Donald Trump's two artful books on the art of the deal and the art of war, he's following those pretty closely. And he's got people around him, like Secretary of Defense Hegseth, who also understands the art of this. Tulsi Gabbard absolutely does. Kash Patel, FBI, DOJ. Pam Bondi, maybe. Kash Patel, Dan Bongino. Oh, yeah. The art of doing this, the art of the deal and the art of war. And you have to remember in his book, The Art of the Deal, he always comes in at the very beginning with some outrageous offer. Outrageous offer that he knows more than likely the people that are across the table from him are not going to accept. But at least the people across the table from him know his starting point is not only outrageous, but probably obnoxious too. And a lot of people use that word against the president right now, obnoxious. So, folks, I want you to understand that there are several playbooks that are being worked out of right now. And let's take a few moments and let's just talk about that real quick, okay? And the reason I want to do this is so that all of us are reading on the same sheet of music. All of us are on the same level playing field, okay? And to kind of give you a catechism for what I feel is happening to us right now. And the first um, paper that I want to talk to you about, I've talked to you about before in the previous time, and that was the two Chinese colonels, Air Force colonels, that wrote the paper Unrestricted Warfare. I'm telling you, folks, right now, that paper that they wrote is more appropriate, in line with what's happening, and probably is being followed by a lot of these folks protesting things that you see going on between governments, because it specifically talks about the 15 modalities of war. And I want to take just a few moments just to go through those with you so that you understand once again what they are. Because every day on news reports, I'm seeing like half of them unfolding and being executed. Okay. People doing the things that we're talking about. And let's just take a few moments and talk about those 15 modalities of war, because this is how the Chinese plan to go after us. They know that conventionally, they don't stand a chance against us. There is no Air Force in the world, and I've promised you this, and I've told you this several times. There is no Air Force on the face of this planet that can take on an eight-ship wall of F-22s, eight-ship wall of F-35s with F-15Es, F-16s behind them, A-10s, whatever, that are being flown by weapons school graduates. You can't do it, folks. I've seen it when I was teaching at the weapons school. In the 4 years that I was there, twice a year, they would have this big exercise that culminated the syllabus where you actually got to go out and practically um, use the knowledge and education you were given. And only one time during that time period did I see the students lose, and they lost spectacularly. There's a vulnerability period, meaning a 3 hour, basically war period. That's what we call vol times, vol periods, where the weapons school bubbas and the F-15 guys um, had a break in discipline, radar discipline. Two guys looking high, two guys looking low. One of the low guys bit off on all the high guys coming at him, and they missed an F-16 aggressor from the 64th Aggressor Squadron coming across the desert like a scalded dog. And the first target he lights up is the B-52 that is tasked to take down the Russian SA-10 site, like a fourth, fifth generation SAM. And we lose a few airplanes. Okay. That's the only time I've seen failure. And folks, when it comes time to run an air campaign, the master air attack plan cell that does all of the planning, everyone's wearing either a weapon school patch or a Top Gun patch. All of the guys and gals that show up first are all Top Gun or weapon school graduates. They are the smartest, most well-trained, most well-educated, and most experienced people that there are in the military. Now, there's also enlisted weapons school grads now too. The sensor operators for the UAVs, the Reaper, the boom operators at the KC-135 weapons school and the KC-46 school. There's an enlisted school, and they're kind of following the exact same syllabus. So I want you to understand that we train to such a razor's edge that we will come in and just lop your head off. And there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing. We're too experienced, too well trained, and we've got the greatest technology and the greatest thinkers. War is about thinking. Wars are won between the 6 inches between your ears. And we're real good at it. Okay. All right. I got off subject here. I'm really passionate about the weapons school, folks, and the people that graduate from that school. And yes, there's people that don't graduate too, but they still take that experience and knowledge with them. Okay, folks, what I want to do now is kind of go through these 15 modalities of war. They are truly something that I believe is important to what's going on, and I believe we're seeing them now, right out in front of us. I truly believe that these 15 modalities of war. Now, where'd they come from? They came from a paper that was written by two Chinese colonels that were in the Air Force. They were going through their version of Air War College. Somebody had to write a paper in China that said, hey, we cannot go toe to toe conventionally in a war with the Americans. We have to figure out a different way of doing this. And so they wrote this paper. It's called Unrestricted Warfare. Do you understand what I'm saying and what they mean by unrestricted warfare? It means no target is off the table, whether it be politicians, elementary school kids, does not matter. But in this paper, they talk about here are the 15 areas we need to concentrate on. Number one, cultural. And all of you can see the cultural fight that's going on in the United States right now between political parties, and we're going to talk about that too, and with a lot of these people that have come to the United States, whether you call them undocumented or illegal aliens, I don't care. They're here illegally in my mind, and there's a cultural war going on. They want to come to the States. They want everything that the States can give them, but yet they're running around with flags of other countries, burning American flags. All right. Uh, which really galls me. Okay. Second one, economic warfare. The tariff war is a classic example of that, where the administration has implemented tariffs at high levels against some of these people that we have been dealing with for a long time. China, the classic example. Look at how those tariffs went up and down, like 140%, down to like 30, okay? That's economic warfare. Now, there's also financial warfare. And I think financial warfare, an example of that is like money laundering, where you have groups that are really making a lot of money trying to hide it and trying to keep it for their means. Cartels is a good example of that. Environmental. All of you have seen, Stop Oil folks gluing themselves to walls, to highways. That's a great example of environmental warfare where they're trying to stop, highways of traffic. And you know what? People are kind of getting a little upset about that. Illegal drugs. All of the news we've talked about, in all of the news reports, you've heard war against the cartels. There is an illegal and illicit substance war going on. Think about fentanyl and what it's done to our nation. How many people have been killed and are no longer with us because of fentanyl? International law. The Hague wants to put Trump and Netanyahu in jail for crimes against humanity. Classic example of international law. Also, national law. Think of all these judges that are trying to put members of the Trump family and his inner circle in jail for these, what was it, 34 um, convictions? And whether you think those are true or not does not matter because it's taking up time and resources and focus because they're being sued all the time. Next, information in the media. I quit watching the mainstream media a long time ago. Matter of fact, 2020. The election of 2020 is where I quit watching even Fox News. Even Fox News. I've gone to an alternate source of information on the web. Two in particular. I'm very conservative. Everybody that knows me knows I'm conservative. Been a huge friend of Rush Limbaugh for a long time. Um, and the media just cannot be trusted anymore, in my opinion. And of course, look at what's happened to the media. Nobody believes them anymore. All of the things that you're seeing on TV right now, particularly with the riots down in Los Angeles, I saw a survey, and I think it was even done by CNN that just said, yeah, okay, we don't believe what you're telling us. And the support for President Trump was still very high. Now, next one, telecommunications and networks. There are there is warfare going on between all of these networks for uh, value and viewership. But, think about how it's so easy now to take over and corrupt, hijack, whatever term you want to use, telecommunications and networks. We can do it from the air. And we'll talk about that when we get into some of this campaign planning. Political. Have you watched any of these subcommittee hearings on the various things that are going on? Secretary Hegseth, testifying, over the Marines being sent to LA and the money that it's going to take, all of those things. That is political warfare, psychological warfare. to make you feel scared. A lot of this, I believe, is happening. And again, this is my opinion, Sluggo's opinion. They want you scared because scared people do things that they're told. And folks, psychological warfare has been going on since Cain and Abel. It, there are groups that have perfected psychological warfare. Resources. How much are you paying for gas and eggs? It has come down in Utah a little bit, not much. Resources are now very finite. And it used to be there was eggs galore. And then I find it interesting that egg farms are being destroyed by fire. One of the biggest ones down in Arkansas was set on fire, and I believe it was deliberately set. Smuggling. How often have you heard about human trafficking? They're making movies out of it now. Any of you that have watched The Accountant 2, it's all about smuggling. Kids, families, people. People are a resource. And unfortunately, smuggling and human trafficking is at the top of the smuggling list. Breaks my heart, folks. I don't know if you saw, but I think it was last week they captured 130 people that were in a human smuggling ring. I think it was down in Florida. How many more of these rings are going on and where? And we're also hearing about all of these people that have flooded the United States are involved in human trafficking. Technology warfare. The United States, we tend to do everything by technology. We've got the highest tech there is, and it is improving exponentially. And a lot of people want to have that. Give you a great example. Chinese fighters, their engines are not very reliable. They've tried to hack into General Electric, Pratt and Whitney, and have not been able to steal or obtain that type of engine technology. And believe me, folks, the power of a fighter engine is an extreme advantage that we have over the Chinese. Our Pratt and Whitney and GE engines are absolutely fabulous. They're very efficient and some of the greatest engines built. Now, I realize the Chinese are buying Boeing airplanes, and those Boeing airplanes come with GE engines and Pratt and Whitney engines and Rolls-Royce engines, but still, the ones that we use in our fighters and our bombers are truly amazing. Did you know that Henry Kissinger stopped the formation of an engine conglomerate between the French SNECMA and General Electric, who subsequently produced the CFM56, an extremely good engine. And it wasn't until Pompidou and Nixon met at Reykjavik where Pompidou said, "Hey, look, Richard, can we talk about this?" That they made a plan to keep the core of the engine made by GE, which was going into the B-1 bomber, which made it classified because it was a Strategic Air Command asset. And they finally came to a conclusion how they would do that. That kind of technology right now has grown exponentially. And the Chinese fighter engines, I'm told by several sources, are not as reliable as ours. Next, terrorists. Just look what's going on around the world. Look what's going on in the United States. Now, somebody wrote to me and said, Sluggo, are you sure, millions of our enemies are here? And rightfully so. And I appreciate Graham doing that. Okay. Because, it makes me have to go back and look to make sure I said the right things. And Uh, I believe I have. Going back and looking at some of the groups of people that have been arrested. I mean, think about that one um, video where a guy, I think he was from Azerbaijan, says, "You have no idea what I'm about to do to you." And I do believe there are millions like him here from countries that are sworn enemies, to maybe include even Iran. Last one, gang warfare. You see it every day, not only in the United States, grips and bloods, but also on a global scale. The gangs are fighting each other because they're fighting for these limited resources and economic and financial superiority. I truly believe that. And go go talk to a police officer, law enforcement, who is on the gang task force and ask him or her, what are some of the things that keep you up at night? And what are some of the things that are going on in gang warfare behind the scenes that you can tell me about that we're not being informed? It'll open your eyes. And I'm not going to go through some of the discussions I've had here, but they've been very fascinating. So those are the 15 modalities of war. Those are the unrestricted 15 areas of warfare that these two Chinese colonels said, this is how you bring the United States down. And folks, here's the list real quickly, one more time: cultural, economic, environmental, financial, illicit drugs, international law, information in the media, telecommunications and networks, political, psychological, resource smuggling, technology, terrorists, and gangs. Those 15 modalities of war you can see are operating at half throttle, full throttle within our own borders of the United States and within countries around the world. Very chaotic. And we're going to talk about chaos and how it applies to this situation here in a few moments. But I wanted you to understand that these 15 modalities of warfare are the unrestricted ways that our enemies are going to use against us. And you can see them in full play right now. So let's go on to the next one. This was a paper written by Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters of the Army. He wrote it, I think, in the 2001, 2002 timeframe, post 9/11, and it's called When Devils Walk the Earth. And he gives a great explanation on two types of terrorists. The first type of terrorist is the practical one. They have an agenda, they want certain things done, and that's it. The second one is the apocalyptic terrorist. And that's the best definition that I can give for these Iranian militia, particularly the group that Qasem Soleimani was running, and ISIS and Al Qaeda. Apocalyptic terrorists. They don't care how they get what they want, they just care that they get it. And they will use unrestricted warfare means to do it. But the really great part about this paper, and again, I'll have a link to this paper because I want all of you to go read it. All of you need to read this and know what's in it, because this is why this Iranian air campaign is happening and potential regime change. We cannot let an apocalyptic terrorist have a nuclear weapon that can fit in a suitcase and be walked into a building in New York, Chicago, uh, Omaha, and explode it. That person carrying that doesn't care what's happening to him because he is doing it for God. And you have to understand also there is a belief over there, much like in the Christian uh, religion, of what they call the 12th Mahdi returning to Earth from a well in some city I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, but it's basically the second coming of Christ from a Muslim Islam perspective. The certain groups of the Shia are the ones that are closely aligned with this. And they believe that in order for the 12th Mahdi to return, they must have the chaos which causes him to return. And you can see chaos, that's for sure. But here's the most important part, I believe, of this paper. The last 4 or 5 pages, Ralph Peters postulates what he calls the 25 superpower do's and don'ts. And folks, I want you to remember this list and the definitions of them. So let's dig into these 25 superpower do's and don'ts really quick. And again, you don't need to write this down. I will have a link to the paper in the show notes below so that you can go right to it and read through it. But please, folks, every one of you needs to go and read these 37 pages because, in my opinion, it's the best overview of what you see happening right now. So let's jump into it. 25 superpower do's and don'ts. The very first one is be feared. If you can put a level of strategic paralysis in the hearts and minds of your enemy to keep them from acting and maybe even reacting, then that is a huge advantage to you. Number one, be feared. Again, these are from Ralph Peters' paper called When Devils Walk the Earth. It's the last just 6 pages that he postulates these. Next one, identify the types of terrorists that you face and know your enemy as well as you possibly can. And I'll just read from this. Although the tactics may be similar, strategies for dealing with practical versus apocalyptic terrorists can differ widely. Practical terrorists may have legitimate grievances, although their methods can't be tolerated. Apocalyptic terrorists, no matter what their rhetoric, seek your destruction and must be killed to the last man. Do not be afraid to be powerful. Cold War era gambits, proportionate response, and dialogue, that has some utility in dealing with practical terrorists, but they're counterproductive when you're dealing with apocalyptic terrorists. It doesn't work. They don't care. Our greatest strength in the United States is our wealth and our raw power. When we go after some of these people, our response to these terrorists acts should make the world gasp. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Be feared, make them gasp. Speak bluntly. Speak of killing terrorists and destroying their organizations. Do it boldly. Explain when necessary, but don't apologize when something goes wrong and something happens. Never go on the rhetorical defense. Concentrate on winning the propaganda war where it is winnable. Focus on keeping and enhancing support from allies and well-disposed clients, but don't waste our time and effort trying to win an unwinnable hearts and minds. Convince the hostile population through victory. Do not be drawn into public dialogue with terrorists, especially not with apocalyptic terrorists. You can't win. You legitimize everything that they're doing by addressing them, particularly through a third media. And they're just going to make extravagant claims so that they can go home and tell their people, hey, you need to join us. The terrorists want you to react. And your best means of unbalancing him or her plan is just ignore the accusations. Don't lean into them. This is a big one, folks. Avoid planning creep. And I mentioned to you early, do not go to war. Do not go to war over here. And the Trump administration has said, we're going to end wars. We're not going to war. But within our extremely bureaucratic system, too many voices are competing for attention with too many innumerable agendas. Some of them selfish, some of them personal. And they want to intrude decisively. Focus on the basic mission, the destruction of the terrorists and their organizations with all moral and intellectual and practical rigor that you can bring to bear on them. All other issues, nation building, alliances, consensus, all that stuff, secondary, not a priority. Now, next one, maintain resolve. And that's one thing that we've not been good at in the United States, particularly when there is a new president or a new party in power. You know, experts and diplomats over there, uh, they present a multitude of good reasons to do things, to do too little, to do too much. You know, we really need to just go in there and say, no, this is the way we're going to do it. And I like what he says here. Beyond the problem of our diplomats, the broader forces of bureaucratic entropy are an internal threat. Look at what's happening with the Secretary of Defense in front of our own political parties in some of these subcommittees. There's a lot of going back and forth. How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? All those kinds of things, which I think is just fascinating for a group of people that have been spending money like drunken sailors for decades. We're going to have to use some new techniques for dealing with maintaining our resolve. And a lot of people know the Republican Party, when they're in power, seem to get weak spines. You have to be constantly stimulated by new ideas that keep us moving forward. When in doubt, hit harder than you think necessary. Now, this is one that's controversial, obviously. Success is always going to be forgiven. Best intentions and failures, never. When we're going to use military force against terrorist networks, the power that we should use should stun even our allies. If we're going to put kinetic force on them, then people should be stunned and gasp. Again, I tell you right up front, I do not want an air campaign against Iran. But if it happens that they attack some of our people and injure some of our people, hey, don't hesitate to supplement initial target list with extensive bombing attacks on nothing if it can increase psychological pressure on them. Demonstrate power whenever you can. Show, don't tell. Seriously. When legal conditions permit, kill terrorists on the spot. And folks, this is the other one that I find controversial. I'm not a bloodthirsty man. I do not believe that we should kill some of these people right on the spot. Contrary to academic wisdom, though, the surest way to make a martyr out of one of these terrorists is to capture, convict him, and imprison him or her. They will become a martyr for the cause. You know, poor old such and such that's in Gitmo. So, in some cases, when you're dealing with these apocalyptic terrorists, some of them that have been Gitmo for how long? You know, this is war. It's not law enforcement. And some of these people, we had a saying in the CAOC during the second Gulf War, there's some people in this world that just need killing. You look through the Old Testament, New Testament, Again, I'm a member of the LDS Church, the Book of Mormon, and there are numerous times where government leaders, military leaders had to take not only their enemies in war, but even in their own political parties and tell them, you've tried to usurp power. You are an insurrectionist, terrorists, whatever name you want to put on them, treasonous, whatever, and you have to deal with them. Never listen to those who warned that ferocity or the amount of weapons that we're using on our part reduces us to the level of the terrorists. That is an argument for the campus, not a battlefield. It's a dirty job doing this. And believe me, if it means protecting American forces, men and women of our military, civilian population that's over there, then you're right. I'm going to use whatever means I can to keep them from harming, maiming, or killing our people. That's the way it's got to be. You spare and protect innocent civilians whenever possible, but don't let the prospects of civilian casualties interfere with ultimate mission accomplishment. This is number 12 on his list. And again, this is one that a lot of people choke on. Um, but we're trying to protect the American people at whatever costs. And we realize that sometimes that may be devastating. We do not target civilians. I don't care how many people are out there that hate the United States that say you have targeted civilians. We as a military, I have never been involved in any situation where we were going after a group of people or a person in a group of people where we said, literally, where I never heard the words, we don't care who's around. We always care. We always think of collateral damage. That's what makes us different from them. We are not going to go into some place and just wantonly kill everybody. Yes, I realize that particularly during the drone warfare strikes, there were innocent people killed at a wedding and some other things. I will tell you that the drone operator and sensor operator that fired that hellfire, not their intentions. And I will tell you on numerous occasions, talking to some of my Predator and Reaper folks that were flying armed UAVs, there were times where they said, I don't know who that is. Stop. Or they're about to release weapons and people came into view and into focus. They didn't know who they were. And they said, we're not dropping. We're not firing until they could vet who that was. And yet it's easy to tell in video who's an adult, who's a kid, who's a guy, who's a gal. But I was never involved in a situation, even when we were hunting bin Laden, where we said, we don't care about who's around him. We just want him. I mean, folks, we even had a lawyer. She was a colonel. As we made the run up to the second Gulf War, and she was in the decision cycle telling us these are the laws of warfare. And many times she would tell us, guys, gals, can't do it. If there was even a smidgen of doubt, we wouldn't drop. We would not drop. And I learned while I was at the Joint Forces Staff College a way to think about this. It's called The Elements of the Decision Maker's Dilemma by a brigadier general by the name of Hall, who came and spoke to us at the Joint Forces Staff College. Those four elements are risk, time, quality of knowledge, and outcomes. If you have quality knowledge that comes in a timely manner, you can reduce risk because you act with more certainty. with a reduction of second and third order effects. But there was numerous times where we didn't have the quality knowledge or something changed during the targeting cycle where we went, we got to start this all over again. And of course, the Iraqis were really good at knowing what that cycle was, and they'd move like their long range radars from like building to building because they knew if that target, say it was a spoon rest van, moved from one side of the city to the other, then our whole targeting cycle started again. They knew it. They probably laughed about it. Number 13, do not let terrorists hide behind religion. Apocalyptic terrorists are going to cite all kinds of religious justification for attacking us. And we cannot let them hide behind their religious holidays, taboos, structures, or even sacred terrain, folks. And you have to understand, even under the Convention, if you are storing weapons in the basement of a hospital, that hospital is no longer a restricted target. That does not mean we're going to attack it unless we see a pattern of life that tells us there is a lot going on here. Saddam was a genius and an expert at counter-targeting the United States and keeping certain targets away from us. That all changed when we went to full up war, but during Operation Southern Watch and Northern Watch, I'm serious. If a spoon rest van with the antenna and everything on it folded up moved from one place to the next, we had to go through the whole targeting thing again. And if there was some structure that we saw weapons being loaded into the basement, then we had to take a really hard look at who else was inside that structure, to include hospitals. And yes, there were a couple times, several times, where we brought the hospital walls down on top of them. But that was because the cached weapons and ammo in the bottom of that thing was killing Americans. But don't let them hide behind religion, folks. Uh, we got to establish a perception, a reputation of relentless pursuit. We're going to come after you, and we don't have any hesitation about coming after you. It doesn't matter what your resolve is. Here's a really important one. Do not allow third parties to broker a peace or a truce under any circumstances. We've got to be single-minded in the things that we do. We cannot let somebody dilute our strength by going some of these third parties, NGOs, whatever you want to call them, to broker some kind of peace or truce, okay? Because normally that ends up bad for us. It gives our enemies time to move. And like I said, if they move, our targeting cycle begins all over again. Uh, we got to recognize the innate strength of our position and stop allowing some of these regional and religious leaders that have counterproductive goals against us to go in and subdue or dilute our efforts. This is a really important one. Do not flinch. If an operation goes badly, if it goes awry, something happens, and friendly casualties may be unexpectedly high, bolster morale and the military's image by striking back swiftly in a manner that it inflicts the maximum possible number of casualties on our enemies and their supporters too. Hit back as graphically as you can and impress on these local leaders. You didn't hurt us. We weren't hurt by this. Next one. Don't worry about alienating already hostile populations. Nothing's going to change their minds. They're already hostile to us. Don't worry about them. If they get in the way, do what we need to do. Whenever possible, humiliate your enemy in the eyes of his own people. You have no idea the psychological effect that that has both on your enemy and the people around him. Shame him or her publicly in any way you can. Create doubt um, everywhere you can. Most apocalyptic terrorists come from cultures of male vanity in the Middle East. And so you use that against them. Disgrace them at every opportunity you get. Done successfully, it degrades them in the eyes of their followers, the people that are around them, but more importantly, their support. If terrorists hide, strike what they hold dear, using clandestine means and, whenever possible, foreign agents to provoke them to break cover and react. Do not be squeamish about this. Your enemy is not squeamish. Subtly, as a subtlety on the part of a superpower just makes us look weak. A lot of the world complains about the manner in which we do things. Hatred for America is like the default position that a lot of these people go into, and that's fine. But the psychologically marginalized are at least as dangerous as those that are physically deprived. We can't worry about, excuse me, about these things that they hold dear. You got to go after them because if that's what helps prop them up, then hey, it's got to be included in this. Don't allow terrorists or our enemies sanctuary anywhere. Keep them moving every 2 to 4 hours. Make them lose sleep. We got to be faster, more resolute, more resourceful, and ultimately even more uncompromising than our enemies. And number 20 is something that we did that we should have never done. Never declare victory. That's weakness in the eyes of our enemies. It really is. Impress upon the minds of terrorists and potential terrorists everywhere and upon the population and governments that are inclined to support them that American retaliation will be powerful, but more importantly, uncompromising. You're never going to defeat or deter fanatics, but you can certainly frighten their support and those people that are around them. Uh, we got to be hard whenever we strike, but we also got to be soft at the same time too. I think I've told you there's a three-legged stool that all air operations kind of stand on is joint integrated fires, persistent intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and continuous humanitarian operations. That's kind of the three-legged stool that a lot of this stands on, all right? And in some cases, you know, we're dealing with governments and groups of people that are inclined to help our enemies, and yet still we have to provide some humanitarian for them, okay? We're not mongrels. We're not these people that hate everybody as so many people believe. We truly are compassionate folks, and I've seen it so many times. Do everything you can to make terrorists and their supporters live in terror themselves. Our pursuit of them should be relentless. They should be afraid to turn out their lights at night. Never accept the consensus of the Washington intelligentsia. They always look backwards to past failures, not forward to future successes. Always. When dealing with apocalyptic terrorists, remember that their most cherished symbols are fewer and far between and more vulnerable than anything we have here in the United States. Don't worry about offending foreign sensibilities and more about protecting Americans. We've got to ultimately take no target off of the list that is going to keep them moving. Last one, number 25. Don't look for answers in recent history, which is still unclear and subject to personal emotions. Studying the classical world, Sun Tzu and so forth, Rome, some of these others, that's a good way to go. But the utter destruction of Carthage brought centuries of local peace, while the latter's attempts to appease the barbarians consistently failed. Consistently failed. Those are the 25 superpower do's and don'ts, folks. Now, again, I've done all of this, folks, so that you have some background on what to think, how to think, why to think that way as we move forward with these operations. And I wanted you to have kind of this background so that you're educated in the things that you think about, say, talk to your friends about, and that it's like a more level playing field because you know these are the things that they're going to go after, but here's how we're going to do it too. How we are going to do it, how we're not going to do it. These 25 superpower do's and don'ts. Again, I'll have links to all of this in the show notes. Okay, I told you I wanted to give you a roadmap to help you understand some of the things that are going on now that are trying to de-escalate what is happening between Israel, Iran, and the allied nations of Israel and those nations in the Middle East. I want to talk to you about what is going on and give you specific examples of what we call flexible deterrent options. They now have what they call flexible response options also. But remember, folks, when I started this, I said on the nation's dime, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. This is where this framework comes from these flexible deterrent options. Those four areas, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic, are the framework that we use to analyze a country's elements of national power. Are they powerful diplomatically, informationally, military, economically? Are they weak in information, stronger in economic? Those kinds of things. These flexible deterrent options are created to go after the diplomatic, informational, military, and economic ideas, resources, whatever, so that it does not escalate. It tries to de-escalate everything from a standpoint of power. Now, let me bring this up closer. Let me first give you a definition of what I mean by flexible deterrent options. And I'm reading this directly from Joint Publication 5, which is our planning document. It is our macro view of ideas, concepts doctrinally that we use to plan campaigns or that we respond to in crisis. The things that we can do in order to be able to respond, particularly in a crisis like we're dealing with now. So let me just read it to you. Flexible deterrent options and flexible response options are executed on order and provide scalable options to respond to a crisis. Commanders include FDOs, FROs, as part of their plans to provide adaptive military options for the SecDef or the president to deter or rapidly respond to any crisis. Both provide the ability to scale up or escalate or de-escalate based on continuous assessment of an adversary's action and reaction. Did you catch what it says there? Continuous assessment of an adversary's action and reaction. That was one of the elements that Cap Weinberger, the SecDef during the Reagan era, had in his five or six um, kind of elements that he would go through in his analysis. Should we deploy troops? Should we not deploy troops? One of those was a continuous assessment of what's happening in the situation. And these FDOs, flexible deterrent options, and flexible response options, FROs, are primarily intended to prevent the crisis from worsening, but allow for de-escalation at the same time. Response options generally are punitive in nature, and we had a whole bunch of them against Iraq as we moved toward the shock and awe campaign, where we began ratcheting up the things that we were destroying. Um, Planning and executing all of these, again, has come from another pub, but let me read you kind of the general overview. Flexible deterrent options are pre-planned deterrence-oriented actions tailored to signal to and influence an adversary's actions. Let me say it again. Flexible deterrent options are pre-planned deterrence-oriented actions. We don't want to go to war with you. We don't want this to escalate. And it's signaling and influencing Iran's actions by doing these kinds of things. They're established to deter actions before or during a crisis. If necessary, FDOs may be used to prepare for future operations, recognizing that they may well create a deterrent effect. And you never know what one thing that you do is going to make the Iranians go, we're out, we're done, we're out of here. Because it'll change from person to person. Flexible deterrent options are developed for each instrument of national power, which I just explained to you. Diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. That's where I get this word dime from. But they're most effective when combined across the instruments of national power. In other words, all of them working together. Diplomatic, informational, military, which I'm very familiar with, and economic, all working together. They can facilitate early strategic decision making, rapid de-escalation, crisis resolution by laying out a wide range of response paths, interrelated response paths. That's why these things are so effective when they're done across all levels. So now let me read to you some examples of flexible deterrent options in the diplomatic area. And here's what Joint Pub 5 says. First, alert and introduce special teams, public diplomacy, reduce international diplomatic ties. We're not going to deal with you. Okay, we're going to kick out all of your embassy folks, and we're just going to cut off all diplomatic relations with you, which we already have with Iran. Increase pressure on cultural groups. Remember what I said, 15 modalities of war. Number one was what? Cultural. Promote democratic elections. That, of course, is beyond the scope of what we're doing now. Combat, non-combat evacuation procedures. That would be getting people out of Iran. Identifying what are the peaceful steps to a resolution with Iran. And if we sat down and talked to them and said, how do we peacefully come to an end to this? That is a flexible deterrent option. Is just sitting across the table going, okay, most of your leadership is no longer with us. What do you guys really want? What is it you're really looking for? Why are you coming after the great Satan and the little Satan, the U.S. and Israel? And what can we do to resolve that? Restricting activities of a diplomatic missions, prepare to withdraw embassy personnel, which I don't think we've had there for a long time. Take actions to gain support of allies and friends. There's numerous ways to do that. To gain support We can do it informationally, militarily, and economically. We could give, say, Qatar billions of dollars in aid so that we can continue using Al Udeid Air Base, massive air base. Um, we can do things like making alliances with uh, Bahrain. And of course, they've got bases there too. There's a lot of things that you can do that will help you gain support of your allies in the Middle East. I find it really fascinating, folks, that just a couple weeks ago, Trump made a tour through Saudi Arabia and some of the Middle Eastern countries. What were his discussions while he was sitting with Crown Prince Salman of Saudi Arabia? You and I both know that while they were sitting and discussing things, Iran came up. Iran came up. Now, of course, you can restrict civilian travel through Iran. I don't think a lot of us go in there anyway. But you could also go in front of the United Nations and do demonstrate your international resolve there. A great example of this is Adlai Stevenson in front of the UN during the Cuban Missile Crisis. You know what? I'll put a link to that to his speech during the October Missile Crisis in the show notes, okay? Because that is a great way of going in front of international partners and going, here's what's really going on. And oh, by the way, we have the receipts and the pictures. The Russians were flabbergasted. They didn't know what to do. We had high level and low level pictures of nuclear missiles being put into Cuba that could reach all the way to Denver. Does that sound familiar? Ballistic missiles going into a country or being used by a country that could reach all of our allies and all of our strategic bases that we have there. And the other part of this is, remember, Iran is getting a lot of their missile capabilities and technology from North Korea. As a matter of fact, there's a launch facility in Iran that looks exactly like the launch facility that they have out on the West Coast. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it literally is an identical build of the one that they have in North Korea. And so if you can get in front of the United Nations, your allies, and show them, here are the receipts, here are the pictures, here is the exact conversations that were going on by telephone of what they were talking about, and put that on the world stage for people to analyze and evaluate. That is a really, really strong flexible deterrent option. And folks, I believe that kind of informational warfare thing is coming. Because remember, information in the media is one of those 15 warfare modalities. Now, let's go on to informational. What do we mean by informational flexible deterrent options? Impose sanctions on communications systems and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance technology transfer. We've been doing that for a long time. Protect friendly communication systems and intelligence collection assets, such as space control, cyber defense, operations security, cybersecurity. We're doing all of that. Doing all of that. Increase public awareness of the problem and potential for conflict. Make public declarations of non-proliferation policy. Increase communication systems and intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, processing, and transmission capability. Interrupt satellite downlink transmissions. Publicize violations of international law. Publicize increased force presence, joint exercises, military capability, whatever. Increase informational efforts. Influence adversary decision making, political, military, and social. Promote mission awareness. Increase measures directed at the opponent's military forces. Implement beaconing interference, jamming, and intrusion into the enemy's information systems. We can do that from the air. We have the capability with our EC-130 Compass Call airplane, soon to be our EA-37 Banshee electronic attack support and jamming aircraft, to be able to get into their system. Maintain an open dialogue with the news media obviously is important. Taking steps to increase public support and ensure consistency with strategic guidance. Now, I want to go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, because that was a flexible deterrent options, masterfully planned, but more importantly, masterfully executed, that caused the Russians to back down from putting missiles in Cuba, which is exactly similar to what we're trying to do here. Make the Iranians back down. One of the first things that we do when we're going to have a full up air campaign is what we call information and intelligence preparation of the battlefield, IPB. And folks, it includes our reconnaissance deck of a lot of different assets. I'm very familiar with the, obviously, Air Force air breathing portion of this, but there's others also. So let me just talk quickly about the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, or what we call reconnaissance deck, recce deck, that we have that we can use. How many of you know that we have over there flying right now what we call the WC-135 sniffer? It's an airplane that takes air samples and can identify certain types of nuclear material, all those kinds of things. Go back and listen to my episode with Bob Melchianda. He flew the WC-135, and I'll put that link in the show notes too. That airplane is an informational, flexible deterrent option of the best kind. Because when we're dealing with nuclear material and possible nuclear weapons, the WC-135 Distant Phoenix is key to all of that. When Chernobyl blew up, the WC-135 was launched and was taking all kinds of air samples to figure out what was going on. And they can do that from the particles that are in the air. They have these big air scoops on the middle of the airplane. And from what I understand, they put these globes in there, glass globes that gather all of the air particles by scooping up out of the air, out of the atmosphere. They bottle that up and they take it home and they can analyze it. And the analysis on this is very precise. So the WC-135 is, we know, is flying there. Now, I know because of my experience that a version or possibly two versions of the RC-135 is also flying. The first one, the RC-135 Cobra Ball. The RC-135 Cobra Ball is an intelligence collection aircraft on rocket and space technology. Meaning, if you've got ballistic missiles firing somewhere, you've got the RC-135 Cobra Ball. When ballistic missiles started flying back and forth over there, the RC-135 got a warning order, prepare to deploy, and is probably deployed flying out of somewhere. It takes very precise intelligence on flight path, point of origin where the ballistic missile came from, where it's going, where it may hit. All of that stuff is analyzed internally inside this airplane. Now, it also has threat warning capability in it too, but this isn't the airplane that does that. And I'll talk about the rivet joint here in just a second. When you have ballistic missiles flying around like you do now, the RC-135 Cobra Ball is an integral part of our anti-ballistic missile defense system. It is a fabulous airplane that does this. You've all seen pictures of it. It's the RC-135 that has the black wing on the right. We call it the dark wing duck. And this airplane is part of our anti-ballistic missile system, as well as like the THAAD radars, the Patriot radars, and it integrates with the destroyers and cruisers on the Northern Arabian Gulf surface that are also collecting intelligence. So you've got several different types of intelligence collections devices that are all watching these ballistic missile shots. They can tell where it was coming from, where it's going, how to intercept it, what's the right path for intercepting it, and potentially where the warhead's going to land. All of that within a very short period of time. And that's all I can say about that. Now, the other version of the RC-135 is the rivet joint. That is our electronic communications intelligence aircraft. It's gathering in all the trons. There are numerous systems on board that help them track any type of radar emission coming out of Iran. It also does communications. So it does signals intelligence, communications intelligence, and electronic intelligence, all three. Now, give you an example of the RC-135 from Desert Storm. The Iraqis, for some reason, didn't understand that we had this airplane flying and a bunch of Saddam's MiGs and fighter jets were trying to flee to Iran. Only problem was they all called in, hey, we're starting engines. Okay, we're taxiing. Okay, we're at the end of the runway. Get ready to take off. Request takeoff clearance. And because of the RC-135 intercepting, collecting, and analyzing all of that information, they were able to put an F-15 ship basically in front of the path of the MiGs that were taking off and these fighters taking off so that the F-15s were able to engage them and shoot them down. I think one of them before he even got his flaps up. So UHF, VHF, also uh, radars, but also mobile phones. This airplane is made for sucking up electronic intelligence, and it is very good at it. Now, obviously, in here you have the E3 AWACS. I realize the AWACS are on their way out, but more than likely we may have a few of them over there. All of the E8 Joint Stars are now in the boneyard. That was also an intelligence collection airplane in the recce deck that allowed us to know what was going on the ground. During the Second Gulf War, during the sandstorm, one of Saddam's divisions said, okay, they're on our turf now. We're in this sandstorm. We're moving out. And the E8 Joint Stars ground moving target indication system picked up their movement. They knew exactly how many vehicles there were. They went by a Marine ground force reconnaissance group that was hiding, that was able to confirm exactly who they were. And I remember watching all of the yellow diamonds pointing downward, turning right side up in red, meaning they were confirmed targets. Because that ground force was telling them, yep, that's a tank. Yep, that's a tank. Yep, that's a BMP. Yep, that's a troop carrier, and in a 72 mile an hour, 75 mile an hour windstorm, using joint direct attack munitions off of F-15Es, we were able to destroy a column of 72 tanks in one pass, 16 bombs, because the J-Stars was able to tell where they're moving. And when they go from upside down in yellow to right side up in red, it also gives you what we call mensurated coordinates that you put into the weapons, the JDAMs, and it knows exact, you know, position, altitude, speed, and direction for those weapons to go after them. And now, remember, we that was 20 years ago. We have even more sophisticated weapons now, like the small diameter bomb or the Stormbreaker. Above all of this, we have the U-2 spy plane. Now, the U-2 TR-1 has many configurations. Prior to the war in Iraq, we wanted to find the WMD sites. That was the big deal about going to war there. For a couple of days, Saddam allowed the U-2 senior spur or span airplane, I can't remember which one, what the configuration means, but it's got a long nose that has a synthetic aperture radar in it, and it's got this great big huge antenna on the spine that allows the airplane to data link the information from overhead Baghdad all the way back to Washington, D.C., Beale Air Force Base, and anybody that's on the net. It also does electronic intelligence, communication intelligence, signals intelligence, as well as using this synthetic aperture radar to take wonderful pictures with this radar of certain things. Now, this was all under the UN when we did this. The UN has a group called the United Nations um, Monitoring, Verification, and Inspection Commission, UNMOVIC. And we had to write UNMOVIC on the tail of this senior spur airplane because it got intercepted by a MiG-25 Foxbat. But the TR-1 pilot says, I'm going where you can't go. And he just went up higher where the MiG-25 couldn't go. We got incredible intelligence on where all the SAM sites were in the Baghdad area because they all turned on and were looking at that U-2 as it was flying. I think when Saddam realized that was happening is when he shut that off. Unmovic was dead after about 3 days. But we got enough information that we had basically target quality coordinates of all of his missile sites, SAM sites, and probably a lot of other things in downtown Baghdad. Did it find any WMD sites? I don't remember, but it was critical that that airplane was flying in this recce deck and giving us all that information. So these airplanes are flying in the 30s and above and are collecting all of this information that we can use as receipts and pictures to show the United Nations this is Iran and what they're up to. Just like Adlai Stevenson did in front of the United Nations during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And think about that. That was in 1962, and now we're in 2025. So you can imagine how good these assets are now and what they can do. Now, remember, I told you I'm a joint warfighter, joint specialty officer. All of this can tie into our surface ships, such as the Aegis cruiser and the Aegis destroyers. They have electronic support measures equipment on board this ship called a Slick 32. They also have their radars that can watch stuff. The Cobra Ball and the cruiser and destroyer data link with each other so that the SM-2 or SM-6 coming out of the deck head toward a ballistic missile has got a really tight solution on that intercept. Really tight. But you know what, folks? One of the greatest intelligence assets that we own in all of our services, you know what it is? A nuclear powered fast attack submarine. They are able to collect all kinds of information electronically through the periscope. They record it all. They can put soft folks up close to a shore. When I got briefed on how a submarine does its business and how it operates, particularly in the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance areas, I was shocked. Sun Tzu in chapter 13 calls this the divine manipulation of the threads when all of these things are working together. Because there's probably defectors, whistleblowers, whatever you want to call them, that are working with our coalition partners. Oh, here's something very fascinating that a friend of mine that used to fly F-16s in Israel with their oldest squadron. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, the Gold Eagle Squadron. He told me that there were 85 to 100,000 Jews living in Iran. Did you know that? Who's their allegiance to? I'm sure the Iranian regime is trying to figure out what these people are doing. And they're businessmen and doing things in their lives, but still, the Mark One eyeball is still one of the best intelligence tools in the world, and the Mark II eardrum is the same thing. All of these things working together give you a incredible informational, flexible deterrent option that allows you to deploy your forces, put them in theater, and get them operating so that you can find what are our enemy's priorities, what are potential targets, what do we need to go after if we come to a kinetic war. But non-kinetically, we're gathering information like crazy that we can use on the world stage to show people this is their intentions. And remember, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters says, embarrass your enemy in front of his own people and his own allies. Imagine if we were to get up, imagine if our UN ambassador was to go in and go, let me show you the pictures. Here's the comms. Uh, here's the radar prints. Um, here's who they're talking to, not only inside Iran, but outside Iran. Are they talking to the North Koreans, the Chinese, or the Russians? And showing those transcripts of what those discussions are. That all can happen here in informational, flexible deterrent options. And again, remember, you're trying to de-escalate the situation by doing this, but you are gathering an incredible amount of information on your enemy's intentions, what their capabilities are, what their weaknesses are, what their centers of gravity are, so that you potentially can go and attack them if it comes to that. Now, let's move on to uh, military options, okay? Tell you what, let's look at economic first, okay? Freezing and seizing property in the United States where possible. That may be something that we do if China gets frosty. Uh, Freeze all their monetary assets where possible. Of course, we gave them pallets of money. Go after their international assets. Financial institutions restricting or terminating any of their transactions. Uh, Encourage U.S. and international corporations to restrict their transactions, embargo goods and services, trade sanctions, restriction on technology transfer, cancel restrict U.S. funds program, and reduce security assistance programs. Those are all economic, flexible deterrent options that we can do against Iran to keep this from escalating. Now, military flexible deterrent operations, I've kind of talked about some of them already. The ISR deck. And again, this is preparation because preparation of the battlefield is the most important thing before we actually go in and start using kinetics. But this is also a non-kinetic means of deterring what's happening, particularly if we took that information to, like I said, the United Nations. Now, military flexible deterrent options. Most of you have seen over the weekend, I think the number is up to 38 KC-135s, KC-46s, all headed east. They bed down in Europe at the typical bases, Shannon, Mildenhall, Spangdahlem, Aviano, and Marone. We know that they have them already at Diego Garcia, but they've also deployed bombers to Diego Garcia, which is just a couple hours away from Iran. There's 6 to 7 B-2 bombers, according to satellite imagery. They just deployed B-52s to the island of Diego Garcia. Diego has a very long runway, has a massive weapon storage facility, and these long-range bombers can operate out of there. When they send B-1s down there, that's when you know stuff's getting real. But on the island of Diego Garcia, they also have F-15Es. Now, why Strike Eagles on the island of Diego Garcia? Two reasons. First, it puts them in the region. And as you know, the F-15E Strike Eagle has a lot of capability to employ numerous types of weapons. One of those weapons is a new capability with this Falco laser-guided 2.75 rocket. There's 7 rockets to a pod, 3 pods on each of the triple ejector racks on the wings. They're carrying 42 laser-guided precision rockets that they can use to shoot down drones and cruise missiles. How the system works. Obviously, they've got the new advanced radars in these airplanes. The pilot is wearing the joint helmet mounted cueing system. So wherever he's looking, the sensors are looking, to include the sniper pod. And if they happen to come in contact with one of these Shahed drones, he, of course, can look at it through the target designator box, designate it as a target, shoot it with a laser, and then one of these rockets launch one of them, and the 2.75 rocket, which costs about $20,000, takes out the drone. The Strike Eagles are also carrying their full complement of 4 AIM-9X heat-seeking missiles and their 4 AIM-120 AMRAAM radar-guided missiles. Pretty expensive way to go after a drone, hence the rockets. But they're carrying 50 potential weapons they can use against ground, surface, over the ocean, and air targets. They're on the island of Diego Garcia. Now, having them on the island of Diego Garcia means that they can move into theater faster if needed, if it's required. And that also is a military flexible deterrent option. You start loading up bases. Remember, I talked about, hey, support from your allies is a diplomatic flexible deterrent option. And when you use that diplomatic FDO with the deployment FDO of putting Strike Eagles, F-16s, F-22s, F-35s, A-10s throughout the Gulf region, then you're sending a message to your adversary, don't do it. And remember, you're trying to de-escalate what is happening. You're trying to keep it from happening. The Nimitz battle group is on its way there. And if the WC, the RCs, and the U2s are all operating together, then the Nimitz is going to have a fantastic intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, or recce deck to help support them, particularly in the ballistic missile war. Now, I want you to go back and think about history. During the 1980s, Iran and Iraq were at war with each other, and they had a phase that they called the Battle of the Cities, where Scud missiles were going back and forth. Some of them were carrying warheads of mass destruction, chemical weapons, biological weapons, no nukes, but there was a lot of people, innocent people, killed and slimed by Scud missiles, mobile launchers carrying chemical, biological weapons, mustard gas, chlorine, and a bunch of others. Horrific, folks, what was happening here during the Battle of the Cities. And that's when we sent in our AWACS to begin helping monitor what was going on to help defend Saudi Arabia. Looks like we might be doing the same thing. That'll be up to King Solomon and, of course, Crown Prince Solomon, excuse me, and President Trump. But we've seen this kind of thing before in the Middle East during the Battle of the Cities. We are much smarter, more capable now than we ever have been when it comes to an anti-ballistic missile phase and knocking these things down. The last thing we want, of course, is the Israelis using their WMD against the Iranians, which I don't think is going to happen. Because you'll notice, folks, the Iranians are going after the Israeli population. The Israelis aren't going after the Iranian population. I haven't seen anything. That doesn't mean it may not be happening, but I haven't seen anything in news reports where it says we're going to launch missiles against Tehran and go after the neighborhoods. Not doing it. Other military flexible deterrent options. You can have soft forces inside Iran. I have not seen anything that says our soft forces are running around in Iran. That doesn't mean it's not happening, though. They're an incredible intelligence gathering tool. The Battle of Tora Bora is the prime example of that, where you had a CIA Special Forces trained group in the mountains watching the Battle of Tora Bora with a ground laser designator that could call in targets. The CIA guys he was either an enlisted tactical air controller or an officer joint tactical air controller calling airstrikes, 9 lines. And folks, these guys can rain havoc. And the Mossad and Israeli special forces have been running all over Iran, finding targets, relaying coordinates for targets, particularly these missile launchers, and going after them. Now, one other thing about anti-ballistic missile defense. During the first Gulf War, Desert Storm, during the second one, Iraqi Freedom, we spent a lot of effort, resources, and capital trying to keep Saddam's mobile ballistic missile launchers under wraps. The first Gulf War, something had never been done before, but we did it. It took a lot of airplanes to cover Western Iraq and a lot of tankers to keep all of those airplanes airborne. Anti-ballistic missile operations is an extremely time-sensitive, resource-consuming operation. And you want to try and do it as quickly as possible. With all of these assets that are flying in the air that I've mentioned, it's possible to find wherever these mobile launchers are, and they've been pretty successful in doing it so far. It's effective, but it's not efficient because you have long periods of time where you have no targets, you're actively engaged in looking for them, but you're expending a lot of resources trying to find them. That's just the nature of, and business of anti-ballistic missile defense when you are trying to find, fix, and finish some of these mobile launchers. And folks, I don't understand how the Israelis are doing it. I was on Ward Carroll's show yesterday, and I mentioned this. As far as I've been able to find out, the Israelis only have seven excuse me, 707 tankers. How they can launch 100 airplanes in 5 waves with only seven tankers, I don't get it. Some of my friends have said, "Oh, well, our tankers were involved." Yes, we got tankers in the region. We got tankers spread out throughout the south of the Southwest Asia. But Trump said we don't have anybody involved right now. 38 tankers are on their way. That is also a flexible deterrent option where we only give logistical and intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance support, period. We are not dropping bombs. We are not shooting guns. We're just looking for things. Just looking for things. 38 tankers spread out across the Iraqi Iranian border would give the Israelis, assuming that they're only refueling Israeli airplanes, an extreme advantage. 2 days ago, some type of aircraft, it may have been a drone, but some type of aircraft left Israel, flew 1,400 miles, bombed and destroyed their 747 tanker, the only one they had, and came home. Could have been drone with a drone. But if they're flying, if that was in fact an air breathing fighter bomber like an F-15I, F-16I Sufas that went and did that mission somewhere beyond Tehran is an air refueling area that is there with impunity. They can't do anything about it. And if you're flying tankers over Iran and there is video of that happening, then you no longer can protect your country. And once the top comes off and you have lost air superiority and the other adversary has been able to establish air superiority, then your forces are open to whatever the Israelis want to put on you. Hopefully not the Americans. Hopefully we'll not get involved with this. President Trump made a promise he's not going to get us involved in any wars. I'm okay with logistics support to include tanker support. That's it. But by doing so makes us targets under the Geneva Convention, under the laws of war. If we're supporting the Israelis, then we're targets too. So there's a very fine line here that the administration has to walk to keep us from being potential targets. But again, folks, the Iranians have been killing American soldiers, sailors, airmen since the second Gulf War and even the first Gulf War. We got the bad guy that was doing it, Qasem Soleimani, but that doesn't mean there's others. And of course, right now, we have decimated, the Israelis have decimated the Iranian military leadership. They have all assumed room temperature. And that's a fantastic feat. Oh, and scientists. And did you hear that many of their scientists working at these places had remote bombs placed in their cars, kind of like the pagers going off and destroying those vehicles? These Mossad guys are good, real good. That was an extremely innovative thing that they did with the pagers. And now it looks like they're doing it to whoever these scientists and people working on their nuclear program and probably their military leadership and maybe even some of their political leadership, making their cars just explode. Uh, the Hamas leader that was in Tehran, they think that the Mossad probably put the weapon that killed him in there 2 to 4 weeks prior to him coming to that room, if they didn't do it with a small diameter bomb. Oh, let's talk about that for a second. We've got a lot of new sophisticated weapons that we have given to the Israelis have bought that they are using. Here is a picture of six F-16I Sufas lined up at the end of the runway in what we call EOR, end of runway, where they arm the weapons all up. They put them from safe to arm before they go out. Every one of these six Sufas is carrying a BRU 61 bomb release unit 61 that has four small diameter bombs, GBU 39s, and they've got a rack of four on each wing. This weapon is extremely sophisticated, very, very precise, and it has about 70-mile range because it's got wings. So when you drop it, its wings fold out. It's called a box wing, and you can actually pitch this thing several miles by getting some smash up, in your fighter and pointing the nose up, and then of course these things coming off. And as I mentioned on Mooch's show, Ward Carroll's show, they come off the airplane and they're like the Imperial probe droid. They just go everywhere because they go to the latitude, longitude, and elevation that they're told to go. Their little brains are focused solely on going to those coordinates and that elevation. And that target, those coordinates and elevation, may be the third story window that is the window of the dining room of one of these military leaders they're trying to take out. The warhead's only about 36 pounds. So when it hits the building, it blows up inside the building, probably starts a fire, does not bring the building down, probably doesn't do a lot of damage inside the building or inside the apartment or the house, but is effective at taking out people that are in the blast range of that thing going off. The other thing about the Block 1 version, which is what the Israelis have, it can also penetrate concrete. And there's a great video out there of a GBU 39 small diameter bomb going through a concrete bunker and blowing up an A7 that's underneath it. So it can penetrate through some hardened shelters also. But other airplanes are carrying GBU 31, Mark 84, 2,000-pound bomb bodies. They're carrying BLU 109 bunker buster bomb bodies. Whatever they use to take out the centrifuges at Natanz that are buried underground, they probably did it with BLU 109, GBU 31 bunker buster GPS guided weapons. The other thing about the configurations of these airplanes, the F-15I or Strike Eagles, the F-16 Sufa, and even their F-15Ds, which do air superiority and air to ground missions, were all configured for what we call self-escort. They didn't have airplanes going in that were strictly flying an air superiority type role. As far as I can see from the pictures, that doesn't mean they didn't have F-15s that were in fact just loaded with air-to-air missiles kind of sweeping through. I have heard of no air-to-air kills by the Israeli Air Force during this entire campaign, even though airplanes took off. Saw some MiG-29s, Su-24 Fencers. There's a whole host of other airplanes, F-4s. The Israelis found some of their Tomcats, and unfortunately, those Tomcats are gone now. I love that airplane, the Tomcat. But there hasn't been any air-to-air kills so far. The Iranian Air Force doesn't seem to have flown much. But all of these airplanes were carrying either the 16s were carrying AMRAAMs and the Python 4.5, which is a fabulous heat-seeking imaging infrared missile. Bigger warhead on their missile. A matter of fact, uh, I think in an interview, Moshe Melnick, one of their top aces, he called it the "Oh my God" missile because when it hits you, you go "Oh my God" because of the explosion. It doesn't just take the tail of the airplane off; it blows it into pieces, little itty bitty fluttering pieces. And of course, I saw a lot of the F-15Is and F-15D models loaded with Python 4.5. Interesting note, the F-15Ds were carrying AIM 97M Sparrows, not AMRAAM. I found that very fascinating why they felt that that was a better capable missile to go into battle with. Don't know why. That is a much older missile that was originally designed in the 1950s. We've shot a lot of airplanes down during Desert Storm with AIM 7Ms, but I was really surprised to see AIM 7 Mike Sparrow missiles on their Strike Eagles, not the fantastic AIM 120s. But when you're carrying bombs and you're carrying air-to-air missiles like that, it's called self-escort. So I believe all of the airplanes that were going into Iran were going in for the purpose of air-to-surface attack, surface attack missions, with the ability to defend your four ship or six ship if they, in fact, got tapped by somebody. The F-35s, I think, were carrying, from what I've seen in two pictures, they were also carrying small diameter bombs. And of course, they've got AMRAAM capability in the door of the weapons bay. So they were also carrying 8 of these small diameter bombs. That airplane is made for going in and basically blowing a hole in their air defenses, what we call knocking down the door. And I'm sure that the F-35 was rolled in that mission, as well as others too, going downtown to Tehran and some of these other places and dropping some of these bunker busters and doing it in an aircraft that's low observable to not observable at all. Anyway, folks, I think that's enough for today. I can't think of anything else for my notes. Okay, bottom line up front. The Trump administration is currently in the motions of doing what we call flexible deterrent options, in my opinion. They are trying to de-escalate the situation. He specifically told the Iranians, you have 60 days to make a deal. Netanyahu attacked on like day 63. The Iranians knew that this might happen. Some of them knew that Netanyahu was coming, and some of them knew that Trump was playing hardball with them. Now we have airplanes in the region under these flexible deterrent options that are gathering intelligence, both signals, electronic, communication, and networks, so that if we do have to go in, we're going to go in smartly. On Ward Carroll's show, I talked about how we do network attack. The Israeli Air Force airplanes were going in with a lot of jamming intelligence support. They have a Gulfstream 550 that is configured just like our EA-37 Banshee for electronic support, electronic attack, and electronic suppression. They've used it since ever since they've got them. Go read about Operation Out of the Box, where they went into Syria and took its entire um, air defense system down. That system can attack networks, send in viruses, give false targets, hijack the system so that they're not talking to each other. And I have it on good authority from reading several things that when the Israelis went to the Deir ez-Zor nuclear reactor that the North Koreans had built for them there along the river, that the system went down for 20 minutes, and one of the air defense commanders came out of the trailer, and all the antennas, radar antennas, were pointing the wrong direction. Amazing stuff. And if you go read and do a search for Operation Out of the Box, all kinds of stuff will come up. And a matter of fact, Air Force Electronic Technology Group did a two-part series on the attack that the Israelis did in 2006 and went into some really interesting detail about how they were able to go in with unstealthy airplanes like the F-16I and the F-15E Strike Eagle and do it with impunity. Thanks for being with me today. Please share this with all of your friends and your family so that they have an understanding and kind of a groundwork and framework that they can use to analyze the things that are going on and why these movements are so important. And hopefully, folks, the Iranians will say, nope, we're not doing this. And hopefully, our administration will keep its promise. We will not go to war in Iran. Thanks for being with me today. Hope this was helpful. Hope this was educational. All right, Sluggo signing out here. Okay, folks, as I mentioned in the show, I want this to kind of be a roadmap for you. I gave you a little bit of reading that you really need to go look at. Okay, the paper by the Chinese colonels, Unrestricted Warfare, Ralph Peters' paper, 37 pages, called When Devils Walk the Earth, that talk about practical and apocalyptic terrorists, and the 25 superpower do's and don'ts. I also want you to remember, folks, Trump lives by two books. And so that means his administration is following that lead. And those are his book, The Art of the Deal, which all of you should read. And everyone should have an understanding of Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War. If you read those two books, you can really kind of see where Trump's going to go, folks. So I hope you enjoyed the 111th episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show, brought to you by Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar. Beautiful 4, 6, and 8 foot. We even did a 30-footer for one guy. He put it on a wall in his hangar. Profiles of famous airplanes, exhaustively researched, very detailed, all the way down to the arming handles and the stenciling on AIM-9 missiles. There's 158 ready to print, ready to go right now that you can order, or let us do a custom one for you. If there's a particular airplane that you really want on your wall that we don't have in the ready to print, fill out the custom form because we can put your name on it from a particular unit, a exact tail number, even a weapons load, particularly for modern jets from like the Vietnam era forward, and you can stick it on your wall. Please go and join my Patreon club, the All Ranks Club. If you join at the designated driver and by the bar levels, You get Q&A sessions with me, one-on-one also. You also get a coin that we're working on. We're getting close. And I have 10 7-inch stickers of famous airplanes from KC-46s all the way up to ME-109s that you can peel off and stick to things like your computer, water bottles, whatever, that you'll get every month. Okay. We're working on 15 more that include F4s, C-54 from the Berlin Airlift, even the U-2 spy plane that I talked about, the Senior Spur and the Senior Span airplane. So go by the All Ranks Club and join at the designated driver or the by the bar. Now, if you just want to contribute to the show to keep us going and put some uh, gas in our tank, I have my Venmo and my Zelle uh, links below also. To all of you, thank you. Thank you for subscribing, downloading, and listening to the Lessons from the Cockpit show. As you can see, I've developed a pattern here. I do an episode about every 2 weeks. I'm on the road a lot more right now. So if you want to meet me, I will be at the Oshkosh Air Venture all week. I will be hanging out at Hangar D, the Candy Bomber Foundation booth, or at the C-54 out on Boeing Plaza, which is parked right next to the KC-135. So I may be bouncing back and forth between both of them. I will have plenty of copies of my book, Tanker Pilot, with me. They are $20. All the proceeds go to the Airlift Tanker Association Foundation and the Heritage Committee. I will also be attending the Military Influencers Conference in Atlanta this year in September. And I will be at Pease Air Force Base for the, I think it's called the Thunder over New Hampshire Air Show, with the Port City Air folks and just walking around there. So 3 opportunities to get to meet me. On the calendar, we're looking at Andrews Air Force Base. I may be there, and possibly the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. Once again, folks, thank you so much for tuning in to the Lessons from the Cockpit show. A little bit of different kind of lessons today, but I thought it was important to give you information to help you as you listen to the news, what's going on, so that you can seriously separate the wheat from the tares and have the knowledge and education to know who's telling you the truth and maybe who's not. Thanks again, folks. Sluggo signing out here from the Lessons of the Cockpit show, episode number 111.